Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning. This is your host, Llorraine Neithardt. You have tuned into Venus Unplugged, your virtual heartbreak hotel. And what we do here is we explore the archetype and the experiences, beauty, sorrow, all the things that Venus brings into our life. Today, I'm going to go a little mystical. Last week, I tyrannized everybody with the sociopath next door, which is as true as it always is. But I thought, well, okay, let's switch it a little bit because we're having some very intense moments in our lives, and what we focus on is really our protection. I started it 6 months ago. I'll probably take another 6 months editing my books. I've got at least 3,000 books, and which are my beloved. So every time it's like, okay, I can get rid of this, and then it's like, I read something and I go like, oh, how could I ever let you go? You're safe with me, and I put it in a beautiful place. But now I've got to chill it. All right. And a beautiful read, if anybody is looking for something wonderful to read during the summer. Well, it won't take the whole summer, but it's called the 40 Rules of Love, and it's a novel about Rumi, and it's by Elif, E-L-I-F, capital S-H-A-F-A-K, and it's just a delicious story about Rumi, who is a ecstatic poet, and when he meets his true teacher, and he begins to experience ecstatic love and writes his poetry from there, and it's really quite amazing. So just as a temptation, I mean, what would Venus be without a temptation, right? Okay. So in part of this book, he's traveling and he comes across a brothel, right? And the hermaphrodite who is running the brothel is like saying, man, get out of here. Like, you're a holy man, and then God's going to punish us because this holy man's sitting here, and we don't want to tempt you with lust and all that kind of stuff, right? And Rumi's like, chill, man. And the hermaphrodite says, that this is the filthiest corner in town. And he says, filth is inside, not outside. Thus says the rule. Is one of the 40 rules. Real filth is in the inside. The rest simply washes off. There is only one type of dirt that cannot be cleansed with pure water, and that is the stain of hatred and bigotry and contaminating the soul. You can purify your body through abstinence and fasting, but only love will purify your heart. And I think that's excellent images to reflect upon. Because whatever we reflect upon, whatever we're thinking and feeling and moving, we bring from the invisible companions, forces. And that's part of the mystic way of loving. It's not meditating on clouds. It is being very much on the earth while you toil and exchange and do whatever you need to do. But there is a subtle awareness. And most of the time, people who are called to the madness of mysticism, because it is pretty nutty, because you're living in, the world that has to do with concrete reality, or so they say. That's the biggest sham ever. And the world. So one of the things that Rumi talks about, and another fabulous read, is Love, Soul, and Freedom by Denise Brenton, Breton, and Christopher Largent, Largent. And what this book is about, Dancing with Rumi on the Mystical Path. I'm quoting from this book where they're talking about, now, Rumi was a Sufi, and his poetry is pure delight and pure madness. It's just fantastic. It just, it tumbles and turns and moves you and makes you laugh out loud, and then you stop and think like, whoa, that's big. So what it talks about is, what Rumi talks about, without freedom, love isn't love, but duty and obligation. That's why in classical literature, valued love between friends more than family, since women and children were considered possessions and not free agents. Love between friends, however, to be free, freely given, freely received. Once we get a taste of love that's not laden with obligation, our experience of love changes. Relationships aren't about gaining leverage, but about letting love flow freely. And Rumi says, love has no calculating in it. And what this refers to is, Rumi is a very important teacher and just, an upstanding citizen. And then he meets this dervish, this wild person, and it opens up the ecstatic way for him. So eventually he leaves to go on his journey. And that's also what is so terrifying when we begin to think and feel and get a calling. And this morning while I was preparing for this, it's like, what gift would I want to give? And I realized that we can never have discipline until we give up resistance. It's not that you're not disciplined. You don't know that the stone in front of discipline is resistance. Once you remove that, you'll be disciplined. You'll know what's on the path. Kind of like taking the cork out of the bottle. Right? So here, this is about invisible companions. And there's something very loving and comfortable. I mean, we're never alone. There's always something suggesting from the invisible realm, which is a hell of a lot bigger than the visible realm. So what this talks about is like companions come in all shapes and sizes, and not all are visible. Rumi's cosmology includes many dimensions of beings, and invisible companions are every bit as close, active, and helpful as the visible kind. And Colin Bark writes, Rumi often mentions the reality of a helpful in-knowing, something he calls the voice, sometimes a kind of magnetism, a being drawing together that friends feel. The invisible beings in the hierarchy of the saints are another level of helpers. Rumi is always clear about the collaborative nature of any action. Many beings, visible and invisible, are involved in what we do, the entire community. Now, there are also not so cool forces. And that's part of learning discernment, or whether we call it the inner voice or inner talk. We need to realize we're calling things forth, and this period, the next couple of weeks, is very, very intense. So we need to stay the disciple of, which is what discipline means. I'm going to be the disciple. I'm going to learn what it means to walk down this path of non-resistance or, eating foods that are, no, I'm not going to have any foods that are poisonous, or I'm going to edit my 3,000 books without resistance. So whatever it might be. So what Rumi talks about, as does Socrates, he speaks of his muse, and Socrates says that his muse, the muse is the archetype of creativity. We need to call on one's muse, or the 9 muses, to help us in any endeavor, any creative endeavor. So Socrates, the philosopher, right? So Socrates spoke of his muse, who never told him what to do, but always intervened to prevent him from doing something unwise. Just like in the medicine people of indigenous cultures work with spirits, guides, and powers and animals in their healing rituals. In their view, the invisible helpers are the ones with the power to heal and transform. Shamans only provide the visible channels for healing energies to flow. And the great 3 religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, describe invisible companions as angels who accompany us from birth to death, while in Hinduism describes the invisible team as gods and deities. But if angels and gods and deities seem a bit magnificent for everyday life, we need to just talk to our cat or our dog or our invisible. So what we're seeing here about these invisible companions, you see, the companion is as is the friend. Okay, the friend is the companion of the soul. Your BFF. I guess your BSFF, your best soul friend forever. Those are the helpers, or sometimes they're auspicious strangers. Somebody who just hands you a book, or you see something, or you look at a tree and you've never seen it at that time of the day. There's so much we look at and don't see. So the archetype of the companion is also the principle of accepting help. Now, in the world of commerce, in the world of trade, in the world of business, which is necessary, there needs to be always an exchange. Otherwise, you create an indebtedness. The same thing is true if someone's always doing you a favor or a kind turn and you just take and don't really think much of it. Well, actually, you're creating clouds of indebtedness. And they gather around you. So we need to have an equality regardless of who is helping whom. And so the equality on the inner or the soul level is independent of circumstances. It's very important to understand. So in one kind of absolute sense, we're always indebted. We're indebted to the visible, the invisible, and we need to respect that. There is no free lunch, truly. And we never know when the exchange needs to be meted out. If you have an opportunity to be kind, take it. You may be clearing your debt. Karma is kind of like compound interest on our actions. That's pretty terrifying. Okay, but that's what it is. Okay, let's move it along. Okay, so to the mystic companion, right, this is or the invisible companions, it changes our life enormously. However we conceive of the invisible companions. They're all around us, and they're bumping, and they're trying to help, though it takes patience to sense their presence and hear their singing. And once again, remove resistance. Resistance is, who are you to hear that voice? I mean, you're not a scholar. You're not a mystic. Well, maybe that's the moment you'll become one, when you really remove the resistance or the self-talk that says you can't do that. Or who are you? Who are you? You're divinity and its potentiality and its state. You have a divine spark. And life and the struggles of life, it's like two rocks rolling against one another, creates a spark. And that's why, we have what we have. And the grief and the sorrows and the journey, that's all about getting that spark moving. Or being an auspicious stranger to someone, or receiving. So however we conceive of the invisible companions, they're all around us, bumping into us. We want to sense their singing and their presence. So Rumi states, one of his poems, the world is an ocean, the body a fish. Jonah is your soul, which cannot see the dawn until the glory, when the glorified God, like Jonah did. Then you'll be released. These are spirit fishes all around you. How Piscean is that? Bumping and trying to help, but you can't see them. Listen to their singing. How they praise, and be patient. Patience is your way to glory. So this is what makes him, beyond brilliant, where he plays with these images of singing fishes and being embodied in these forces, and these are all entryways into the world of imagination, which is where the spark resides. And we never know what crazy-ass divine madness image is going to trigger that. So we involve ourselves in these kinds of images. And this happens with any poetry. I happen to adore the madness of Rumi, because he's also hilarious. He just keeps on turning things upside down. And then he states here, because of these invisible companions, changes occur in our lives that don't lend themselves to outward explanations. Voila! I love those moments. When you know, dang, this is great. Or I didn't earn this, or whatever. It arrives. And, maybe in the song of fishes, okay? Of millions of people, we're drawn to just the companions we need. Those who quest dovetail with ours. So maybe that's part of what Venus Unplugged is about. It's your blog talk radio companion. So tell everybody, tune in. Got to get this moving. Got to get this around. People are loving it. Share the love. Gift them. Part of the kindness. Or visible companions leave us, and though it may feel right for us to go our own way, we just can't explain why. What Rumi says here is a hand shifts our birdcage around. You can't see it, but there it is. And he writes, what draws friends together? Do not conform to the laws of nature. Form doesn't know about spiritual closeness. If a grain of barley approaches the grain of wheat, an ant must be carrying it. A black ant on black felt. You can't see it. But if grains go towards each other, it is there. Magnetism. You can't see it. We don't know until we have the two poles, which is also why we, wind up with some of the experiences that we have. It's like we don't realize that, we're through not understanding ourselves. All right, there's a magnetism, and in that magnetism we attract. So it's not one's fault. Okay, you don't know the magnetism. And the same thing is true in manifestation. You're not going to manifest unless your etheric body has enough magnetic force. So we need to keep the seven bodies healthy and alive and in relationship to one another for that magnetic force. And then we need to recognize the gift or the grace. I've seen it so often. Something will happen in somebody's life that is pure grace, and they can't reach out and take it. They let it fall. That's going to make angels cry. And we don't want them crying, do we? Unless it's to purify. And here he states, a hand shifts our bird cages around. The bird cage is our life. Some are brought closer, some move apart. Do not try to reason it out. Be conscious of who draws you and who not. So Rumi has this delicious way of putting opposites together, and the beauty, particularly in poetry, it's the doorways. Sometimes it feels like a revolving door, but that happens too. That can be cool. It's the doorway between the words. It's the doorway between the images. Poetry is a dance of images. So the more we know about symbols and images and references, and the more you're going to get out of that poem. Or you can take one favorite poem and work on it your whole life, and every day you'll see it differently. And Rumi is always talking about his companion, his beloved. He's in this constant ecstatic state of the beloved, fully aware of these invisible companions and what they mean. So just as visible companions provide channels for the invisible ones, so too both visible and invisible companions provide channels for the ultimate source of help, the unseen presence that gives the gifts. I mean, isn't that wild? You're about to receive grace or a gift, this unseen present, and you know it not? Kind of gives you chills. And then Rumi perceives a rich, multiple levels of helping companions, but he also perceives them as emanating from one source, the origin of spirit, and where the opening and closing of the hands, or it is joy, and we're all different kinds of laughing. Now, doesn't that make you want to just swoon? And that's why we need fainting couches. I'm sorry. We need to be able to faint in ecstatic, pure delight. We're all different kinds of laughing. I was always in trouble for laughing. Always. And many, many years, because I was like you find it so funny. And it was like, and of course, so much of what I was laughing at was the invisible because, I was born, with this mystical gift, and I could see the invisible, which is hilarious. You think Cirque du Soleil is interesting? Invisible path is like, whoa. But I was a kid, so I didn't know. And I would just giggle and laugh and stay up at night and talk to the spirits and all that stuff. Thank God I was the seventh child because it was just like, I'll just leave her alone. She's eccentric. And then I had many choices of where to fall asleep, and I would choose one and fall asleep after laughing in the middle of the night. So this is what he writes. There is an unseen presence we honor that gives the gifts. Your water, we the maelstrom. Your wind, we're the dust blown up into shapes. Your spirit, we're the opening and closing of our hands. You, the clarity, we're the language that tries to say it. You're the joy, we're all the different kinds of laughing. Any movement of sound is a profession of faith. And the millstone grinding is explaining how its believers in the river. No metaphor can say this, but I can't stop pointing to the beauty. Every moment and every place says, put this design in your carpet, because the mystics were the great, carpet weavers. So, not quite like put that in your pipe and smoke it. Well, I guess you could work it that way, whatever metaphor works. And so, if you wish, I'm sure there's lots of stuff online about Rumi and his poetry, or pick something out that maybe a Rumi poem a day. Just pick it out and keep it with you and see how what he says is living truth. We shift perception. We give up resistance. Rumi guides, because he is this ecstatic poet that sees the invisible companions. And so call on your invisible companions, or be a visible companion. Understand the profound nature of true friendship. And loved ones and husbands and wives and employees. And, we can all be friends and love one another. So it doesn't matter what the outer nature of the relationship, but that friendship is that exchange. The invisible companion in your life, that exchange, the source of kindness that also opens doors. But you've got to do the same, otherwise you just stay in indebtedness, and, the compound interest is karma. So that is what I suggest. So once again, please tell the world about Venus Unplugged, because that's how I know I'm doing a good job and having a good time. And the English lady just told me I got to bounce, give up resistance, and discipline will follow. And on that road is the mystical road. It's like a parallel reality that we're always in the presence of. We don't go anywhere. We don't even go anywhere when we die. It's not like we travel to outer space. We're companions. Death and life are companions. It's ever present. But because the mind needs past, present, and future, we give it a distance. But it's all right there. So dance it and celebrate it and be a laughing, mystical, divine piece of joy. Or use your tears, whatever you want to do, but stay on point if you can, and give yourself the gift of the 40 Rules of Love. It's a great read, and it's very informative. We always need to be reminded. So, hasta la vista. I will talk to you next week, and who knows what I'm going to have in store. Many, many blessings. May you meet your invisible companion and see its presence. Like that poem, The Footprints in the Sand. That gives you the idea of the presence. So, my darlings, cha-cha.
They're going to kill the love of my life.
Casey!
If I don't go back to what I was doing.
Our line of work is quite brutal and quite ruthless.
How far would you go for love?
You steal truck, bring it to me. Then you make your money.
Is it dangerous?
Of course it's dangerous!
Nicholas Hoult, Felicity Jones, with Ben Kingsley and Anthony Hopkins.
All this trouble, all this pain, for love.
Collide. Now playing. Rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13.